So many people in my discussions, especially from the race realist side, love to make the claim that poor people or nations are just naturally dumber or they would be wealthy too. I usually just dismiss that as blind classism or racism and had methods to dismiss it, but a video put a halt to that. People in poorer regions are naturally less talented and educated, but not for the reasons you think. I watched a video on the problems occurring in East Germany in the post-reunification period. Both Germanys are equally German, but East Germany is still impoverished compared to the rest of the country. Are these poor people less intelligent than the rest of the German population? Well, yes and no. Basically what happened before the Berlin Wall came down, West Germany had become an economic powerhouse, while East Germany was a Soviet financial failure. Upon the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the best educated and hardest workers moved to the West and never looked back. This boosted West Germany even more, while East Germany had a massive brain drain, ensuring that there was a much smaller pool of hard workers to work in the area and run the government. Brain drain still plagues East Germany, as each new generation wants to head west and enjoy the metropolises with great amenities and high levels of intellectual thinking, and get the hell away from their roots they view as backwards in thinking. Brain drain is one of the biggest causes of poverty. If there are no jobs, the more educated people will leave. If there are less intelligent or less educated people running government and voting for said government, they can't create the jobs needed to keep those people, causing the cycle to repeat. The cities with the least poverty are the most integrated cities in the US, where poor, wealthy, and middle class live relatively close to each other. Poor can learn middle-class skills from their middle-class coworkers and neighbors, and middle-class can learn wealthy job skills from their upper-class coworkers and neighbors. The more the brain drain, the more segregated the cities get, as the elites live in their own group and don't get a good handle on the needs of the poor. The elites don't use public schools or transit, and the system goes to pot, driving the next generation of educated and intelligent kids to get to other places. This is seen all over the world. I had to leave Indiana because there were no jobs, and they need well-educated people badly, but I needed to survive, though I'm not sure I made the right choice as to where to relocate to. Educated people in the country flee to urban regions. People from poor nations lead to rich nations. Nigerians outside of Africa are some of the most educated people in the world, while people in Nigeria are not that well educated compared with the West. If you start off as a disadvantaged nation and the option for brain drain opens up, it will happen, hurting that nation. Colonialism wrecked Africa, putting it at a massive disadvantage with the rest of the world. Some governments were started by people who could barely read or write, as they had been so repressed, and the educated ones left the second they could, ensuring Africa continues to be in trouble. Poverty is a cycle that is incredibly hard to get rid of. This is another example of it. Poverty is not a way to weed out the stupid, it's a way to ensure generations of suffering occurs for possibly centuries. People in poverty areas who take the horrible jobs are more often exposed to pollution and have less nutrient-dense meals. People who work in hard manual labor think very differently than people who work in more mentally intensive jobs, and being migrants, they take more of these crap jobs on. Therefore, they never develop a culture of thinking and learning for fun, as it's not practical. They will also often go live in some of your worst, most empty cities that have had a brain drain to better the cities to replace these people, or the natural population reduced of wealthy nations. Also, they'll still come from a culture where they need to pop out as many kids as possible, so they can't spend the time, energy, and money focusing on making a few kids better educated. Lastly, one of the biggest problems is that thanks to brain drain, wealthy nations like the US don't have to invest in their citizens' education for PhD level studies because they can just pirate them from other countries. Most of us are now burnt out and loaded down with student debt when we graduate from undergrad, and these big high-tech jobs will be done for a lot cheaper by outside workers. In the US, the poor, uneducated workers are not taking American jobs. It's happening in the high-end jobs, which thankfully they are, because none of us Americans have the resources to get into these jobs, and if we get enough, making that education pay for itself in the long run is a massive gamble. This ensures that the most important jobs in the country are lower paid. When people ask why do immigrants come here, why don't they stay in their own country and make things better, that is impossible for low-skilled immigrants. It's not true for an educated immigrant. Allowing low-skilled labor to come in as much as possible is also a really good idea because they're jobs that no one wants. America has the best integration system, so if they have any really bad or barbaric ideas, quite often they ditch those whenever they're able to live in a land of freedom and opportunity. I am all for immigration, skilled and unskilled. However, it is both devastating to the nation they left thanks to brain drain, and allows the US to put off fixing our education system to have a lot of immigration of the H-1B level. I'm really torn on this issue. However, during the recession, many Africans who had gone to the Western nations to find work found it easier to go back to Africa and start their own businesses, and using their knowledge of the Western-style workplace and efficiency tactics, were better able to provide a huge boost to many African countries. So a work-study visa for the US might be a better option. Give them a couple of years to come here and work, but be required to go back and live in your home country for a few years before you can come back and get some refresher training if you want. Mind you, I have no idea about the legal impacts of this, and how this would be implemented, especially if someone wants to be here long enough to become a citizen, but that's another issue. Perhaps if they go through this cycle enough times, they can be guaranteed a US citizenship. This is just an idea, and when they return to their country, they can take their new way of thinking and higher value savings they've earned back with them and slightly improve parts of their society to begin to slightly reduce the brain drain in their nation, encouraging more people to stay in their country other than just to see the world and enjoy adventure of living abroad, not because it's the only real opportunities they have.